must be some motivation. Can I have a pointer, please? So I am talking on intervention strategies for symptomatic vitreomacular adhesion, surgical or off-creep class में. No financial disclosure. So all of you should be aware of the International Vitreomacular Traction Study Group classification of VMA, VMT and macular hole. I will not go into the details of it, but I will just, this should be read up. And also it's important to understand that once a vitreomacular separation has occurred, still you are left with two rings of hyaloid which are attached around the fovea, which is very important. So this is the detailed classification, and it's important to understand what is vitreomacular adhesion, what is vitreomacular traction, and how does the macular hole form. For us, which is relevant at the moment is the vitreomacular adhesion. It can either be classified as focal, which is less than 1500 microns, or broad, which is more than 1500 microns. And I will tell you why this, what is the importance of this. This could either be isolated or concurrent. Then you have vitreomacular traction, which is again focal or broad, and then you have a full thickness macular hole. This group particularly studied macular holes which were less than 400 microns, or which were more than 400 microns, and again small size holes which are less than 250 microns, or medium which are between 250 to 400 microns, and of course the etiology, whether it's a primary or a secondary macular hole. So just carefully look at these pictures. You have an incomplete PVD, you have a broad attachment of the vitreous to the retinal surface, there is no traction on the fovea, therefore there is no alteration of the foveal contour. Now as the traction increases, which can be because of an anteroposterior traction and also by the collagen fibrils, this particular foveal pit becomes a little bit cystic. What actually is happening is very important to understand. This is an important formula for you to understand that what is stress and what is force. We have no way of calculating the force that is being exerted on the fovea. We have no animal model, nothing which can actually calculate live or what is the force being exerted. If you calculate the force by the area of attachment, if supposing the vitreous is attached, and this is from the article by Richard Spade, where they found that if you have an attachment, they measured it with by OCT, and it was 1828 microns, the foveal depression was maintained because the amount of force which was being exerted over the wide area was, the overall stress on the fovea was less. Now as the attachment area decreases, the amount of stress would definitely increase because the area of attachment is reduced. Therefore, the amount which is being pulled on the retinal surface goes up. As this goes further and the vitreous attachment becomes still less, this leads to production of a cystic lesion. Now, in all these cases, the visual acuity can be still 6/6. So you can have a 6/6 vision with these changing parameters, and then we have to decide what should be the strategy. When should we operate and release this vitreomacular traction? They further did some EM studies and found that if you can take up an epithetal membrane, you are finding RP. So this is the ILM. This is some amount of vitreous present between the ERM and the ILM, and you have the retinal pigment epithelial cells with these microvilli. Now, how does a retinal pigment epithelial cell come in when there is no retinal break? There is no way an RPE cell should come in. So they found that these RPE cells are the cells which have converted into an RPE cell from the hyelocytes, or they have come up from the macrophages. Now if you look at a larger picture and you find these microvilli, you find that below the ERM, you find the vitreous which is present between the ERM and the ILM. So if I have to remove the entire vitreous, if I just remove the ERM is not sufficient. Therefore, my surgery should remove the ILM, which would remove the vitreous and remove the ERM. So that should be the strategy of removing for the surgical removal. Now there can be three options available: a natural way of the BMT getting released, a pharmacological resolution, or the surgical resolution. So this is, by the natural history, you can have a release of vitreomacular traction. This is before and this is after. But these situations are rare, and you cannot say in which case this is going to occur. Therefore, we have to intervene. Now, oxyplasmin is a truncated form of human serine protease plasmin, and it targets the major components of the vitro-lectin interface. Basically, it targets the fibrinolectin, laminin, and produces a vitro-lectin separation, and it also produces a vitreous liquefaction. And there was a nice study called the MIMI Trust study, basically stands for microplasmin for vitreous injection and traction release without surgical treatment. And this has been a pivotal study for VMT and macular hole. I'll just go through some figures. So essentially, oxyplasmin has a dual action. It causes liquefaction of the vitreous, and it causes separation of the vitreous at the vitro-lectin interface. So you here have collagen, you have fibronectin, and you have collagen fibrils. So oxyplasmin acts at this level by exerting a proteolytic effect on fibronectin, laminin, and collagen fibrils, breaking these bondages, and therefore it will resolve the vitromacular adhesion. Now this is a mouse model, and if you look carefully, you have here the vitreous body where a PVD has occurred, but below that again you find that there is a dual layer present. Therefore, we might remove and induce a PVD, and yet we are left with some amount of vitreous cortex behind. This is from the study of one of the patients which they have documented. This is initially, this is the after injecting oxyplasmin. This is what the picture was about 7 days later, 28 days later, and this is almost about 8 months later. So you can find here there is resolution of the vitromacular traction. There is still some fluid present. Visual acuity is about 20/100. It's still better, it's about 20/30, 32, and here the visual acuity is 20/20. So it takes a little time for the visual acuity to improve. Now let's look at some of the data of oxyplasmin. 30% of the oxyplasmin treated patients showed resolution by day 28, and 8% of the placebo treated patient with 100 microliters of fluid injected in the eye showed the same resolution. So if you look at the overall data, you will find that 22% of the oxyplasmin treated patients actually improved, because 8% would have anyway improved with placebo. Now when they analyzed the data further, this figure actually came down to 28%, and this figure increased to about 14%. So eventually you had about 14% benefit by oxyplasmin. Now if you look at that VMT patient who actually resolved, that means out of this 30%, 41% had a 2-line improvement, 14% had 3-line improvement, and 70% resolved in 7 days. Now the question is the cost really relevant, which is it costs about $4,000 and only 30% resolution, and you end up with some problems which I'm going to say. In the macular hole subset, these were the results, I'll not go over that. Now if you look at the side effects, you find here the safety data shows the most common side effect was vitreous floaters, and the second commonest was eye pain. This is initially, and this is at day 8. Now let me just quickly go through this. Dr. Atul pointed out about the macular hole. Now this is the patient who had absorbed vitromacular adhesion of 1830, visual acuity of 6/6, normal foveal contour. Again, visual acuity is good. The vitreous adhesion is reduced, the area is reduced 550 microns, and this is 1 year later, visual acuity is same. So normally we say your visual acuity is 6/6, even if we are seeing traction, we may not operate. I personally feel, looking at all this data, we should probably intervene at this stage when we find these cystic spaces, even though the vision is 6/6. Why allow this patient to go to a stage like this? Okay, I think I should stop here.
Take it out a few more minutes. It's okay.
So let me just show the videos. So these are just some examples of clinical examples of vitromacular traction being released. You can see here. This is a patient operate. Now here I want to point out, supposing you have a vitromacular traction and you have a membrane here, the question that arises is, do I release this membrane completely and cause a macular hole, or do I truncate it? So what I personally feel is that we try to remove have a cut here, leave a little bit membrane. This will eventually settle down, because if we try to peel out this membrane, we might actually end up producing a macular hole. This is just a rapid video of, I think all of you know. Essentially is in any surgery, you go ahead and produce PVD, which you can do transplant assisted. And following that, after having done the PVD, now if you are going to remove the ILM, the standard way is that you can pick up the ILM forceps, pinch up the ILM and remove it. I do it slightly differently. I take a normal 26 gauge long thoracic needle, create an edge. I don't pinch the membrane, and after doing, staining it with a brilliant blue for the macular hole or for the vitreomacular lesion, then take the ILM forceps and remove the membrane. So that's the only difference I wanted to show. This is again another almost this you can see here that one after having induced the PVD, again we do the same thing with a pinch. I'll probably skip this video also, go to the next. Okay, now here the other alternate way of doing it is that you can induce the edge creation with the diamond dusted Tanos forceps and then pick up with the ILM forceps and peel off the ERM with the ILM. Now here the important thing to understand is when you do a brilliant blue staining, the ERM areas will not be stained. So the negative staining by the brilliant blue actually helps you identify the ERM areas. So a brilliant blue dye can be used for staining the ILM. When you pick up the ILM and remove the ILM, the ERM automatically comes off.
That's one question for you.
Another thing suggests, this is from Richard Spade. This is just to show you that now they are looking at the undersurface of the detached vitreous, as well as looking at the ILM surface, and it's interesting to find that you have RPE cells present on the undersurface of the PVD. These RPE cells which are present on the undersurface of the PVD could contract and lead to problems, and that is what Richard Spade has looked into. It's a beautiful paper. Yes, sir.
What do you think is the future of ochriplasmin in, suppose, our country, keeping the fact that it's about 4,000 rupees for a single vial?
So a person who is living in the United States can travel to India, have a vitrectomy, go back, the flight paid off, the surgery paid off, and still not pay $4,000. Does that answer you?
Fine. So we'll move on to Professor Madhukar Dogra, who has immense experience on diabetic macular edema and his surgical concepts about that. We'd like to hear that.
Good morning, friends. At the outset, I would like to thank Professor Atul Kumar for giving me this opportunity to be part of this course. I'm going to talk to you on the surgical intervention in diabetic macular edema. I have no financial disclosures. We all know that diabetic macular edema is a management challenge, and this is the commonest condition we, all of us interested in retina, have to tackle day in and day out. Since the DME is a chronic disease and it requires long-term strategies, and we also know that this is something which is multifactorial, because basically this is because of a systemic disease. So management is also in a multimodal fashion. So we know that we go with the metabolic control. We have lasers. The role is going down probably at present. Of course, intravitreal anti-VEGFs and steroids, they are really on rise. And I'm just going to confine myself to the partial vitrectomy and its role in cases of DME cases. How this whole business of partial vitrectomy for DME came, I think there have been a lot of studies, if you go, that PVD may resolve DME spontaneously, and this has been seen. And the lower incidence of DME is always seen in PVD is seen in DME cases. We also find many of these cases having vitreoretinal adhesions and incomplete sort of a PVD in these cases. So release of the abnormal vitreomacular adhesion with elimination of maybe trapped VEGF may improve DME once we do pars plana vitrectomy. So once we talk of the indication for pars plana vitrectomy in DME, DME with taut hyaloid, I think this came way back. This is almost going back 20 years when some of the studies were done and it was found effective. And so is the DME with vitreomacular retraction. And then are the epiretinal membranes. Probably we knew about them, as well as these epiretinal membranes could be both vascular and avascular, overlying the macular surface, which will produce the distortion of the macula. Then the last is recalcitrant DME without vitreomacular adhesions. So, and if we look at these indications in the present context, these are getting much more well defined. And early PPV at this time is indicated in the tractional type of diabetic macular edema. However, once we talk of a vitreomacular adhesion, where you don't have an adhesion, then in some of these eyes, you see, the problem is, I think it is not happening only because of the traction there. There are other factors which are responsible. So sometimes we just think, no, I'll just remove it and everything will be all right, which is not the case probably in many of these cases. And of course, still the pars plana vitrectomy in case of recalcitrant DME without vitreomacular adhesion is still a controversial subject. I think we might have a case like this. This is a tractional DME. In fact, you can see traction better here in the 3D picture. Now, we are not really sure that this whole thing is happening because of the traction. This might be happening because of even other reasons. And then you have something like this. Maybe, I think here, major component is because of the vitreomacular traction. So, that is understandable. So, I think it is very important for us to talk to the patient in the beginning, because many a time there are unrealistic expectations. So, not in a DME case. So the visual prognosis may be variable. Patient may stay where it is or may even worsen in about 10% of the cases. So we have to explain the risk-benefit ratio, including the risk of further loss of vision after surgery. And we must have informed consent. I think it's much more important in a case where probably you have a disease like DME. So all like 20, 23, 25G, they are possible. And we do pars plana vitrectomy and try to remove the posterior hyaloid and peeling of any associated ERM. ILM removal, it's not like macular hold, where it is essential, it is very well established. Here it is really controversial. So you may require gas tamponade very rarely in these situations, even if you have removed the ILM. This is way back, the case done in 2003. You can see there, and just in 6 days, everything goes down. And this is also the same, I think, done same year. There's a thick ERM here and pars plana vitrectomy, and these are all time domain pictures here. And of course, this is the case which I'm going to show you a small video clip. You can see this is a 67-year-old lady, 6x60 visual acuity, and you have this kind of a taut posterior hyaloid membrane there. And so here, what has been done is that this ILM is not peeled, only the external limiting membrane is being peeled here, only the ERM is being peeled here. So once you remove the ERM, in such a situation, I usually don't prefer to remove ILM. So there are reasons for that, which I'll briefly touch upon. And so you remove this, and once you have removed this, I think if everything is fine, you can just leave it at that. You don't need any kind of a tamponade, or you need nothing in such a situation. So this is the case now down the line. You can see the date there, and so this patient in about almost approximately 3 months, she's 618, very happy from 660, and you can see now, you can even see the fovea. You can see everything doing very well here, and this is the OCT. You can see the contour has come back and the thickness has gone down. And this is another case. You can see again a large cystic area. Here probably a small gas bubble was put because I think there was a tiny little break, And this is another one, very thick one sometimes you have, and you can see marginal gain because everything is deposited right into the center. And this is what happens. I think this lady, practically one-eyed, relatively younger, I was reluctant to operate her all the time. And her vision was going down and they pushed. And here there is a clear-cut macular hole. And the macular hole was, ILM was peeled here, and we had to put a oil tamponade. You see, the problem is there is a neurosensory atrophy. That is what bothers me. And now she has just gained about account finger vision. So that is what sometimes happens. She remained probably where she was. And these are some of the issues where we don't understand. Of course, we do have these cases sometimes, younger patients, and they have these kind of vascular membranes distorting 660 vision. This case, we had to give injection because it was so vascular, and of course you remove, you get rewarding result. So these are some of the vascular ERMs which you would remove, and this was almost 6'9", very happy patient. And of course you should be very careful. I think this is one example. We feel there is a ERM, there is vascularization, you give injection, the whole thing may crunch up. That is what can happen at times, that's the problem. So as far as DME surgery is concerned, VMT on OCT is not uncommon, but it may not be the primary cause, as I said, in all cases. So both tractional and biochemical factors, they play a role, and this is being taught more and more at this time. So at this time, what is being thought of that we must give a trial of pharmacological therapy before PPV, because many of them, they may respond, and if they don't respond, then only consider surgery. So this is what most of the time is being thought. I think the beneficial for both functional as far as the ILM is concerned, I think there is a publication from Dr. Atul also here, and we are not really sure at this time if the ILM peeling in non-tractional DME really improve the outcome. It does improve the anatomical outcome, but functionally it has been debatable, and most of the time it doesn't. And there has been a debate about also whether ILM peeling lead to papillofoveal distance is shortened, the retina gets more thinner, as I shown, and up to 20% ganglion cell loss has been reported by some people. So in conclusion, I would say that PPV has a beneficial role in tractional DME. I think we should start first probably pharmacotherapy at this time. ILM peeling is controversial. At present, we are not able to predict which patient would benefit from surgery. And in future, probably we will have more defined indication, I'm sure, as we are getting better imaging modalities, as well as the pharmacotherapy is also improving. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any audience questions? Yes, please. Can you give him the mic, please?
Sir, in this kind of frank tractions, do you first try intraocular injections or do you directly go for surgeries in this kind of cases?
I think at this time, we must try injection first. That is what we are changing ourselves to. I think at one time what we were doing, once we found tractional DME on OCT, of course we never lasered them. We straight away took them for surgery. But at this time, we do try, because as I was showing that case, I think it never underwent surgery. I didn't show you the picture. It did show improvement and the thickness came down. I think it's not in every case. That it might be partly contributing, not totally. That is what. So both, as I said, tractional and biochemical factors may be playing role in, but which one is predominant? That's what would ultimately be our goal. If it still remains the same or the response is very little, then we know probably tractional component is playing more role, then the surgery has to be taken.
And sir, any preference of injection steroids or anti-VEGFs in these kind of cases?
I think anti-VEGF always. We, at this time, because we know steroid we reserve mostly for the recalcitrant cases because of the obvious problem with the pressure, the cataracts, these are younger patients, so all those issues are there.
And sir, in cases of the focal VMTs, like you've shown in case where you have just focal VMTs, do you still go for injections first, or in that case you prefer surgical?
Most of the time, I think such cases we always operate in. Maybe there it is much more obvious that the whole thing is so much pulled up and you have an obvious, that may be a case. I think we'll get more information, more defined indication in future. I am sure we're going to reach that.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll have Dr. Manish Nagpal speaking on some. Yes, please.
We should be measuring the amount of radiation, and if eventually we do a study and find out that if it comes to this level, that means it becomes focal eoptic?
I think it might happen. I'm sure it might happen. Because I think once it is a large, broad adhesion, probably it is the VMT which is playing a major role. I'm sure it's going to come to that. Thank you.
So the take-home message from Dr. Vard also, that if you've got ERM with DME, it's better to give injections, anti-VEGF injections, as Dr. Vard said. Repeat it till such time the edema goes down. If it stops going down, that means the ERM is at cause, the traction is at cause, so then we should definitely peel the ERMs. Not immediately at the first instance. Now we'll hear Dr. Nagpal, Manish Nagpal, who's got immense experience on various retinal disorders, the surgical manner, especially on submacular bleeds, his experiences.
Thank you, sir, for the kind invitation. I'll be speaking to you on the submacular bleeds and how do we go about managing them. These are my financial disclosures. When you look at these medium-sized subretinal hemorrhages, I think most of the times we evaluate them using multimodal imaging, as we discussed in the first talk, that if you can get more information out of your angiography and find some specific lesion like a polyp where you can also treat additionally. Otherwise, we give gas and anti-VEGFs, and sometimes we would add laser if there is an extrafoveal lesion. So this is the size of a submacular bleed which would be quite easily managed using anti-VEGF, gas, and possibly a laser. So an example of that before we go on to the surgical part, a case like this where you do the FA and ICG and you can see a hot spot which is there, see much better in the early phases of the ICG which suggests the polypoidal changes, and these we treated with gas, anti-VEGF, and once the bleed cleared we repeated the angiography and then treated that small lesion again with laser and eventually had a very good result. So these cases can do quite well with this kind of a management that we see. In the past, we used to do a lot of surgical removals of membranes when the anti-VEGFs were not there, and these are some examples of cases that in the past that we had done. And some of them, especially the younger patients with the subsensory membranes, used to do quite well. But the AMD membranes, because they are sub-RP, they don't do very well with surgical removals. And we had about 5 years back published some data on surgical removals in the era of anti-VEGFs, wherein these eyes were treated with anti-VEGF, and there was already some regression, but to reduce the number of injections, we would go and remove the membranes. Of course, right now, we don't use this approach at all, but just to show you the historic aspect of how the surgery eventually would be based on is about removing these membranes of the blood underlying there. So at that time, we used to make these small retinectomies after clearing the vitreous, and then with a curve, with a curved forceps which used to come, we designed specially for this with a long beak kind of forceps, which would allow us a good access to that plane without disturbing the retina overlying. And the membrane used to be removed at this stage, and then you would just give a air fluid exchange and position with these. And then, of course, a slightly larger hemorrhages also we used to remove, but that used to lead to a larger retinectomy and used to lead a lot more damage. But still, it was a compromise between lesser damage versus nature, leading to a disciform scar at that stage. So these were also removed along with the membranes, and you would probably achieve results, but with a lot of thinning, destruction of RP, which was there. So recently, with these large subretinal hemorrhages, and now that we have such good instrumentation that we already discussed about, we've been using retinectomy in the periphery to approach it rather than making a small retinectomy, which would be difficult to manage without using either a TPA or by enlarging it and causing a damage due to the enlargement of this retinectomy. So a patient like this had come with the other eye showing something like this, which obviously meant that he had a similar pathology in this eye, which must have led to a scar like this, and then he had a fresh bleed, and he was extremely disturbed. So at that stage we had discussed surgical option with them, and we operated the patient with peripheral retinectomy. And here you see we first clear the vitreous completely using triamcinolone to make sure that the whole vitreous, the hyaloid is gone, and then the vitreous attachment is all gone. After that, just to assess whether the perfluorocarbon could displace it or not, you can see how taut this whole area is and how thick the blood is. So eventually we did a diathermy to the whole temporal area, and once we had done that, we cut that area into a large flap, creating a giant retinal tear in the periphery beyond the diathermy mark so that there's no bleed. And once we achieved that, we everted the flap so that you get a direct access to that plane of blood, which otherwise is difficult. If you make a small retinectomy, it's fine for a small membrane, but for these large it's difficult to get access to a plane, and you would end up causing a lot of enlargement of retinectomy. So this is actually a much safer approach, because today the instruments allow us to handle the retina much better as compared to what was there 5 years back. The gauge is smaller, and the cutting abilities to clear the peripheral vitreous base is much better. So here you can see we have access to the blood, and then slowly, patiently, we just remove all that tissue which is there, and the membrane, of course, along with it also gets removed or debulked from there. And once it's cleared, we again put perfluorocarbon just like we would treat a giant retinal tear, and then gradually fill it up and do a 360 barrage laser at the end and finish the surgery. So this is what you achieve the next day, and this is the pre and the post 1 month picture of the patient. And he's extremely relieved with the 660 visual recovery from almost a hand movements and having already lost the other eye. Of course, there's a lot of RP destruction which is unavoidable because of the membrane's presence in the sub-RP plane that it would lead to. And I think some people are also trying RP transplants from other areas. I haven't done that because I'm not sure, I've not seen results good enough to do all those extra maneuvers at the moment. But we need something more finite for this part of the problem, but if you can debulk it, it's much better. This is another case, a similar case, which had turned up, and you can see this is the diagnostics we've done on them, and there's so much blood that you can hardly see anything behind the FA or the ICG itself. And again, we had undertaken a similar procedure where we first debulked the vitreous, removed the hyaloid. This is very important because these cases, if you don't remove the vitreous very well, because you're creating a whole new detachment and retinectomy can lead to a lot of PVR if there is vitreous left. So there's more reason to be extra cautious with these patients. And here again you see that we are gradually everting the flap to gain exposure to that particular area. Eventually, this is like the whole complex of blood with the membrane which is there. So gradually remove it. Sometimes these membranes are quite tough as well, and it takes a while with the cutter to get through to them. But these new instruments, the new cutters, even though they're smaller gauge, with some persistence you can always get most of this tissue out. So once again, it's the same process of putting the flap back and then doing a laser with the periphery. Like a giant tear. This was reserved after that, the pre and the post. And again, these patients are much happy because they have this acute loss of vision when this massive hemorrhage occurs, and it's almost like hand motions. And so they are very relieved to get back that whole peripheral vision, even though they have a central scotoma because of the RP defect. And that's of course something at the moment that we're not able to look at. So these are some of the examples I wanted to share with as of today that we would treat. The medium-sized hemorrhages, I would stress again, work very well with anti-VEGF with gas, and if you can find an extrafoveal leak, do a laser on the polyps, or do a PDT if you have a subfoveal leak. There's no reason to go in for a surgical intervention there. But when you look at these large bleeds, I think we need to look at alternatives, because even the gas anti-VEGFs do not really move this blood as effectively as we see in a lot of cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ming. Small question before the audience could ask also. Manish, you got a situation where a patient comes to us with a sudden onset diminution of vision due to a submacular bleed, bleeds about 2 disc diameter in size. What are the factors which make you decide that I should do surgery versus just conservatively manage?
Well, 2 disc diameter, I would do the FA ICG, and as I said, I would look for any leak, if at all it's there. If ICG, we always do a combined FA ICG in these cases. Wherever there's a large bleed, not for the usual subretinal classic membrane, but wherever there's a large bleed, ICG can give information in a lot of these cases. So if we find extra information, then we, as I said, we'll do the same gas positioning with laser at that time, or maybe once the blood clears a bit, at that time we could do the laser to those areas also. For two disc damages, I don't think I'll undertake a surgery.
And suppose there is a component of about 40% a sub-RP bleed, there's sub-neurosensory bleed, that's subretinal, and there's another about 60% and 40% sub-RP. Do you think in a dense, elevated submacular hemorrhage extending to the arcades, would you take him up for surgery considering it's a 40% sub-RP bleed, or would you say that? No.
Frankly speaking, the concerns were more when we were looking at removing it through a retinectomy or using TPAs and positionings and all these. But if you are using this technique of reverting the flap, then actually it's not an issue about it being sub-RPE or, I mean, of course, if it's sub-RP, even by nature or by whatever modality you use, there will be destruction of that area as far as the vision is concerned, even if you just do an anti-VEGF gas, whatever. So here you get access to the plane. So the access to plane is not an issue whether it's sub-RP or sub-sensory, if you are reverting the whole flap. But if you are making a small retinectomy to remove, then sub-RP is extremely difficult and it's going to be more traumatic to remove.
Okay, any audience would like to ask? Yes, please. Use the mic.
I have a simple question.
Yeah.
These are all very good videos, and the important thing I want to ask, in most of the cases there was atrophy of the RPE noted at the end of the surgery or maybe at the 1 month follow-up.
Yes.
So what was the final visual outcome?
Yeah.
Secondly, in first case you showed that where you did created the GRT and all, that the other eye, the previous eye was already having the same pathology.
Yes.
So at that moment we should be a bit vigilant for this eye not to go in this stage. So was the previous ICG or something like that in that case?
Yeah, we always put them through, but the amount of blood which is there in these two cases which I showed you as compared to the medium-sized one, there's really not much information you can get, even though we put them through those tests, but all you see is like a huge black mass which is hiding everything behind it. So you don't get information. And obviously we discuss it's a one-eyed status, but the one eye which the patient has is also coming to you with a sudden acute loss, and so we discussed it with the patient about the pros and cons. But personally, by the end of it, we felt that it was better that we use this approach than not having used it.
And one thing I would like to ask Dr. Ajay and the panelists, that ocular-plasmin, that it looks very fascinating to use it, and it's a chemical vitrectomy and all, and percentage-wise, it again looks bit fussy. But if you look at more properly in the article, there is hardly any difference if you look at the confidence interval and all. Will it have any role in cases of PVR, especially in young patients? Can it have any role? Because those are the places it's really challenged to remove the vitreous and
yes. PVD induction is very difficult in pediatric younger age group. So does he feels that probably oculoplasty may have a role there? What do you?
The success rate for the PVD induction was 28%. And people have tried other techniques of injecting gas and causing a mechanical for inducing a PVD. I personally don't think that I would like to use an oculoplasmin and go ahead and induce a PVD, because I don't think it justifies the cost benefit.
I think if we look at the science of it, as in the molecule itself, it could have amazing uses where pediatric detachments are concerned, where we have a tough time removing the hyaloid for diabetics, as you said. But of course, when you look at the costs at this stage, we would not be able to use it for any of these indications anyways. But the science of it, I think, the ability of that molecule to do that split, I think it would. Yeah. I don't think we can deny that fact that it would be capable of doing that.
Another thing which I think I forgot to tell, which you must know, is that oculoplasmin can be injected in the eye only once. There have been cases where they injected more than once. There have been 2 reports books from the US, one from New York, one from the West Coast, where the lens dislocated posteriorly.
The zonules
are weak. So the lens dislocated posteriorly. So if you have a pseudo-exfoliation, if you have zonules which are weak, and you inject oxyplasmin, it can cause problems.
It's an enzyme causing lysis.
Yes, it's a plasmin, truncated form of plasmin.
So, can there be one thing more I like to ask? So, if I plan to inject oxyplasmin in a patient who has like active PVR changes or something like that, how early should I advance? Like what we are using Avastin, like we will inject around 2 days before the surgery. Though no hard concrete evidence, still we are using it. Can this be extrapolated to Avastin or something like that?
Manish, you have any data?
No, I'm not aware of it being used for these indications.
How do you want to extrapolate to the
that's what I'm saying. Avastin initially came for CNVM. Then we started using pre-operatively in diabetics and where there is active bleeding or vascular pathologies before planning surgery. That's what I'm trying to apply to oxyplasmin. If I inject it and I plan my surgeries after 5 days or 7 days,
Please understand, oxyplasmin works for vitreomacular adhesion, not for vitreomacular traction. If you have an epithelial membrane, oxyplasmin is not going to work. So if you have thick PVR membranes, oxyplasmin is not going to work. Because oxyplasmin disturbs the laminin and fibronectin, and on collagen it's not very effective. So if you have those membranes which are there in PVR, I personally don't think oxyplasmin is going to work, because even the study group has said that oxyplasmin is not to be injected in cases, it's only symptomatic vitreomacular adhesion. But cases, they have said, if you read the article, they said that they have injected in cases with epithelial membrane, but thick epithelial membranes do not separate with oxyplasmin. So if the epithelial membrane doesn't separate, I think PVR is not going to work.
Yeah, so it's basically for VMT without ERM.
Without ERM.
I have macular holes usually without ERM. And it works about 25 to 50-40% cases both. Not more than that. And they say mostly that they tell the patient that this is a preparatory for injection you may be put for surgery. They actually prepare him for surgery, because they know the results are not very encouraging with ERM.
Another thing is vitreous floaters. Because you inject and the patient has vitreous floater, he'll get so disturbed that he'll say that, doctor, please do vitrectomy, I'm so tired with vitreous floaters.
Towards the end of the session, we'll just talk a minute or two about optic disc pit with macular detachment. The pathogenesis is the intraocular pressure and both fluctuate whenever there is a pit. But the IOP is somehow always greater than the intracranial pressure when there is a pit. So there is a direct communication with the subarachnoid space. That's a dangerous part about having an optic nerve pit. And often we miss it. So whenever we see a macular detachment, we think in terms of CSR or some other pathology. Always look at the edge of the optic nerve on the temporal side, towards the lower half or even the center half. You will see a greyish circular oval-shaped lesion, which is well circumscribed, and that's a pit. And then the OCT is an extremely useful tool. As we've discussed in this macular surgery session, the first talk, that macular imaging is very important. So the OCT should be done across the optic nerve head. So the IOP is usually greater, and therefore the vitreous fluid moves into the pit sac. There is a sac in the region of the pit, which is a defect in the optic nerve. And that's what usually happens. But so this within the sac there is a turbulent flow, and this turbulent flow contributes to the enlargement. That sometimes what happens is the IOP, as I said, is usually greater, but sometimes what happens, the reverse occurs. And the reverse occurs in the pit cases when the intracranial pressure increases as compared to the IOP. So the fluid from the sac of the pit, which may be subarachnoid fluid or CSF, we don't know exactly what that is, but that's supposed to move into the eye. And as the turbulent fluid moves into the eye, it kind of cleaves its way into the retina, the region of the macula. And the space it finds is the perivascular spaces. So the blood flow, the capillary channels, along the edges of the capillary channels of the spaces, that's where it causes the separation of the retina, like schisis like separation along with a macular detachment. So, yeah, coming to this right away, the origin of the fluid will be vitreous orbit, or it could be CSF or leaky blood vessels. But probably they say vitreous and CSF contribute. Vitreous mostly, and probably CSF to some extent, but there is fluid in the sac and turbulent fluid. So when the ICT increases, then the IOP, then the fluid passes through the perivascular spaces. That's the etiology of the pit. And this is the small optic disc pit which is seen, and so one should look for it, and there's a little bit of a detachment extending along the peripapillary region all the way. And so that's just to tell you, but we should look for all these things. So this is the case, this is the optic nerve pit, and it's got multi-layered schisis. This is characteristic of the OCT, the outer nuclear layer, and also various other layers, especially the outer nuclear layer. There's a dissection of the fluid through the perivascular spaces causing multi-layered schisis. This schisis along with this is the outer lamellar hole, but you can have a macro detachment also. The fluid causing just a picture akin to CSR. So this is a short video clip. Tell you. We've done a few cases, and the Japanese have again been pioneers in this kind of work. It's Dr. Hirakata, who was initially in Duke and now in Japan, and he's done pioneering work on optic nerve pits with maculopathy and myopic traction maculopathy, because they have a lot of these myopic patients in Japan. So you do the PVD induction. Here we don't inject the dye brittle blue G because the dye may migrate into the submacular space or even travel upwards. And postoperatively also they say that probably the gas may not be injected because it may not go to the submacular space. And oil definitely is strongly contraindicated, the oil injection, because the oil, there is a case report by Ferenc Cohen that the oil is migrated to the subarachnoid space in the brain. So it will travel through the pit and through the defect. So this, the ILM peeling is done with little transdermal crystals. We are trying to avoid any use of brittle blue G dye or any other dye which can migrate into the submacular space and may have some toxic effect. So we've done the ILM peeling without that. And this is the wide angle system, then removing the peripheral vitreous. And here I just want to say we leave the eye fluid filled. Unlike previous other surgeries, these cases, as I said, gas should not be injected because the complications of gas going submacular, and also in Hirakata's pioneering work, he has shown that the visual acuity and the anatomical recovery of the schisis and the detachment occurs over many months, 6 months to 1 year. So he says whether you put gas or no gas, leave it full fluid filled doesn't make a difference. Also the complication less. Oil, of course, strongly contraindicated. It can travel through the pit sac and upwards into the subarachnoid space. So you might have a patient come back with oil on CT scan of the head or MRI showing this oil bubble in the subarachnoid space, which would be a terrifying concept. So here you can see the schisis has settled down and the fluid or the outer lamellar hole is a little of subsensory fluid, but the schisis has settled down. This usually takes about 6 months out, but the patient does improve vision. We will have very encouraging results. So coming to the end, the management options are basic. We've all given all, but the one highlighted is that we should do the PVD induction, because they say there is a peripapillary traction. At the edge of the optic disc, there is a peripapillary traction. This peripapillary traction contributes to the ICT increasing more than the IOP. Otherwise, the IOP is always greater than the ICT, so then these complications don't occur. So this is what happens. You do the PVD induction, which is the main thing to do, or with or without the ILM peel. Because they say that there may be some hyaloid remnant or there may be some ERM, so the ILM peel may remove that residual traction. So that's the only thing. That's what previous surgeries have been described in the other circles, but the one which is recommended is given in the talk. And this is just that because the retina is extremely thinned out in the sciatic area, so there you may cause of break formation or a tear in the macula because it's very thinned out, the sciatic retina. So you have to be careful. So we send this for a public. Thank you. So we'll take questions from the audience for any of the panelists for the presentations or to discuss any of the macular surgeries.
There's one small announcement. I think all of you got a mail which Manish had got from the European Vitreoretina Society about the optic pit. I think Manish can tell about that.
Manish, would you like to tell us something about it?
It was actually just the AVRS every year. There's a meeting and they usually focus on collecting data from all the people involved related to one particular pathology. They did for macular holes and results. So this time they sent a mail that since optic nerve pit is as a rare condition and everybody individually does not have a vast data, but if you pull in data from all the retina surgeons, I think
very good idea.
So they asked that all the Indian VR surgeons, whoever have data, they have a fixed questionnaire which they wanted you to fill and send them the data so that they could compile the results. So I think Ajay had mailed that as a VRSI mailing list. So, and in case you haven't received, you could just get in touch with Ajay to send it to you or me.
Any questions are welcome. We have a couple of minutes. Actually, we're just finishing time. So, thank you all very much, and thank the panelists and the instructors for this. The last day to have come all the way to this hall. And yes, you have.
The heart exudate is right on the foveal center.
This is a diabetic macular edema case. Directed first Dora. This is DME patient
DME
with a heart exudate in the fovea.
And the foveal center.
Foveal center is a heart exudate.
I think that is totally a different problem, because heart exudate in the center, the best is that you have to probably do the best, whether it is systemic issues, which will be very important, and in such a case maybe there is dyslipidemia or there are some renal issues, because most of the time whatever has been tried surgically, even removing them, it has not helped. So I think nobody is doing surgery for removing now those heart exudates. So mostly what helps is, which would be somewhat, because these usually, if they are dense, they lead to subfoveal fibrosis. But if you get rid of them, you will preserve some vision. It is some vision, but not very. They don't do that well once they are there, because they usually take long to go, and by the time there is a fibrosis also. So I think the systemic issues has to be addressed, and other things have to be treated, like if you have a thickness there, you give anti-VEGFs, and if you also, whatever the issues are, everything needs to be treated. But one must explain to the patient that this is a situation where the improvement would be,
Yes, you can have one or two questions, yes. You can please speak in the mic if you don't.
Manish sir, what are the chances of rebleeding in your surgical cases? Rebleeding or bleeding occurring during surgery when you remove the clot?
Okay, during the surgery. I mean, theoretically yes, but we've done about 3 such cases of the large retinectomies, and on table I have not seen an actual bleed occurring. But at the time that you are taking off the inner, the membrane part of it, when it comes off, there is a chance that it might bleed. So you basically need to be ready to press the foot pedal to raise the pressure, and if you do that, it's enough. Because in the past, when we used to remove those subretinal membranes, even when you actually remove the membrane at that junction, it could sometimes bleed, and we used to raise pressure at that point of time. So I think if it bleeds, you can raise pressure, and it usually would stop.
Okay, so raising the IOP. Yes.
Yesterday I just heard about the vitrectomy for the tractional papillopathy by Dr. Muralidhar. Dr. Doka, have you any or do you have
submacular fibrosis?
No. Okay, I understand. Yeah, you are talking in terms of a diabetic papillopathy. Yeah. I think we have no experience, we have not done, because we also understand that diabetic papillopathy is totally a different disease. Maybe in some cases that may be a contributing factor where probably Murali did some surgery, but we know that it might have so many components, because it is also a part of AION, it's also a part of certain other things which happen in these cases. So it may not be that simple, but maybe a particular case where more of traction was there, it helped. But otherwise not, we have no experience.
Yes, we have one last question.
Do the macular detachment?
I think so, if the vision is dropped and this thing doesn't resolve. If you keep it there, then the species it deteriorates, it gets more worse, and the surgical results finally would be much worse, and as well as the visual acuity recovery would be, because the photoreceptors start degenerating, like any other macular detachment.
Actually, I had a patient who had presenting vision of 660. Over 6 weeks to 8 weeks, vision has improved to 6.9. With medical management, and patient is not keen. OCT picture looks much better.
What kind of medical management?
We gave Nevanac, we gave estazolamide for a few days. We just observed it on OCT. The fluid absorbed, still some fluid is there on OCT. The vision is drastically improved to 6.9. He is not keen on any surgery because his vision is good.
Well, that's nice.
So, what is the chance of recurrence, and when do we advise surgery from? Just keeping you on observation.
Usually by the time the patient comes to is quite chronic and the species is there and the detachment or the outer lamellar holes are there. That's the time when the vision has dropped, when we advise them surgery. And the surgery is quite simple actually. You don't need to do very major. You just have to induce the PVD. That's the main thing to do. And then also subsequently when you don't inject gas or oil, there is no positioning required. So the patient is absolutely, recovery is very quick. So I don't think if you have a reason that the patient's vision has dropped and it's OCT showing changes of multi-layered schisis with detachment, I think personally one should probably opt for surgery if there is a. But you can always wait for a couple of weeks to see at least a serial follow-up. The patient is more convinced. Let them come back a month later, and if the vision is still falling and the OCT is not showing any improvement, then in that case you are justified in doing surgeries.
I think Dr. Atul has said it will always recur. We have had experiences in past of doing laser. It will work for some time. It will always come back.
We did painkiller laser
during its own phase. We related to drug. It just closed temporarily, but it's always going to go.
We used to do laser a lot.
Yeah, and it would work for 6 months, 1 year, but it would come back. So
and a very destructive procedure, this laser. Visual acuity drops, and the fluid keeps coming back. So we never had a good treatment.
Yes.
Till we realized this is a short surgical procedure.
But I think as the natural progression of the disease is that sometimes it's very confusing. I have patients which I am following every 3 months. Sometimes the vision is 6 and sometimes it is 6:24. So the fluid increases sometimes and sometimes.
That's when the IOP balance keeps getting affected.
Yes.
So it's better that if you go to have a chronicity of the disease, better that you take the disease out from its root cause.
Yeah, but the patient asks that, doctor, this time I have improved from that to this one, so now I can wait 3 more months.
It's like recurrent bleeding in diabetics or non-diabetic SEEDS patients. They'll say, now my vision has improved. But then they come back again with a recurrent bleed. So would you like to wait? And then you have to explain it to the patient, discuss the outcome.
I do have a patient like that, and in that I had lasered it, and still we have been following her for more than 4 years. Still her vision is quite good. Sometimes it deteriorates, but she remains.
But you're destroying the papillomacular bundle by doing laser around the edge of the disc.
We had lasered it about 4 years back.
Yeah, it will come back.
It's a guarantee from Dr. Dogra's side that it will come back.
Okay.
5 years, 7
Thank you very much, all of you, for very interactive and very interesting for staying in this hall and listening to all of us.
Very well, and that is a classical example of contact lens warpage. You should also make sure that the post-operative course for all these patients is optimized and is actually the best, and therefore unnecessary prolonged post-operative course should be avoided by identifying patients with dry eye. So here, in very quickly, step by step, I'm just going to cover how are you going to actually take history and examine these patients. Most important thing, first and foremost, is these patients will come to you with actually, they will be primed for refractive surgery. Most of the patients nowadays, they come to you and they say that I want refractive surgery. So the first thing that you have to talk to them is also because about the patient satisfaction, and tell them that the aim of refractive surgery is to offer a good uncorrected visual acuity in independence of spectacles and not the mathematical zero refractive error. And the patients also have to understand that if they have amblyopia or any other diseases, because of which best corrected visual acuity is limited, it cannot be improved to after a certain extent with refractive surgery alone. Refractive surgeons should also exclude patients with unrealistic expectations, as is very obvious. You have to take social history of the patient and about also his occupation. For example, if somebody, especially it is more common in the United States, these people who are in military and Navy are actually allowed to undergo laser vision correction. So if they are from that background, you have to make sure that they have the best possible uncorrected visual acuity. If there is anyone who is in contact sport or is prone to have ocular trauma, such as he is in army or he plays football, then you should avoid to do LASIK for them because he may have flap complications, and mostly get surface ablation done for it. You have to also see some of these systemic conditions. In general, in young group, they are very uncommon, but you have to make sure that they don't exist. And some of this which can interfere with healing are SLE, Sjogren's syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis. You have to ask for the history of keloid formation, especially if this patient may undergo PRK, because they will be one of the respondents and can have haze and regression. Patients who have diabetes will have obviously unpredictable healing response and increased risk of infections. So it is almost like a relative contraindication. Where pregnancy is a strict contraindication for several reasons. Number one is these patients usually have refractive fluctuations. The fetal exposure to topical and systemic post-refractive medications is questionable, and it is also shown to increase risk of post-LASIK ectasia, basically because of increase in relaxing hormone and decrease in biomechanics. of the collagen fibers in general in the body and cornea in particular. You have to know if the patient actually suffers from any ocular diseases, is taking any ocular or systemic medications, has undergone any previous surgery, any retinal lasers, is had any previous history of trauma, has propensity of trauma, has been using contact lenses, which type, how many hours is he using. So basically, whenever the patient comes for examination, the best time to examine the patient is after 1 week of abstinence from contact lenses in terms of soft contact lenses, and at least 2 to 4 weeks in terms of the RGPs. So this is something that you have to discuss with patient. And one of the most important things, or probably the most important thing, is that the patient should have refractive stability. So there are several ways in which you can check it. One of the important criteria of laser vision correction right now is that patient should be more than 18 years of age, and that is arbitrarily because usually after this age the patients have stable refraction. You have to know if the patient's previous prescriptions are with them, so that you can have actually objective quantification if his refraction is stable or not. There are spatial concerns if the refractive instability is seen even after 18 years of age, and the concerns are a patient with formal fluorescent keratoconus may have lenticular changes, especially if it is a pre-presbyopic or presbyopic age group and you are planning to have a presbyopic LASIK for the patient, and also corneal Barbett's syndrome for the patients who are using contact lenses for a very long time. Eliciting history of the previous attacks of herpes is more important probably in the West than in Indian subcontinent, because these patients can have reactivation of herpes and may require acyclovir prophylaxis. Patients with history of suggestive of dry eye disorders such as quiet, red and itchy eyes and blepharitis. These patients usually have dryness, a lot of crust formation at the lid margins and itching. So basically these patients are not excellent candidates to be taken for laser vision correction right away. The surface has to be optimized before undertaking these patients. You have to see if the patients are taking any medications, especially sumatriptan, because they can alter wound healing of the cornea. Isotretinoin is actually very commonly used by the skin specialist to treat severe acne. So you have to actually make sure and ask them specifically if they are using this, and they should actually keep away from isotretinoin at least 6 months after LASIK again, because that is the time for the total nerve regeneration to take place and the sensitivity and the treatment to restabilize after laser vision correction. Over-the-counter medications such as antihistaminics also exacerbate dry eye after LASIK, so they should be stopped prior to refractive surgery. You have to know the family history, if there is anyone in the family who has had either known keratoconus or have unstable refraction, has undergone corneal transplants, etc., to give you a kind of clue to if this patient maybe not be a good candidate. You have to check visual acuity and refraction basically exactly similarly the way that you do, but what is here important is that in each patient you have to do cycloplegic refraction, because that is the refraction that you are going to actually treat at the end of the day on these patients. After that, make sure that you do a good PMT or post-mydriatic test to check the best possible visual acuity. Some of these patients are not going to actually achieve 20/20 with the best possible refraction, and many of them can be amblyopic. So basically in all these patients you can do a RGP trial just to see if the visual acuity can be improved, and if not, you have to counsel these patients very well that this is the best maximum possible vision that they will have even after LASIK procedure. It may not improve after LASIK. Ocular motility is something that is usually neglected in LASIK evaluation, and this is a very important thing, especially if the patient has asymptomatic tropia or phoria, because after the patient undergoes LASIK procedure, the tropia or phoria may break, and it can become manifest, and the patients can have diplopia, and they will not be very happy with the outcomes. So trial with contact lenses before the surgery in such situations will give you and the patient a good idea about how is going to be the ocular motility. The corneal diseases such as, of course, obvious infections, of course there are contraindications. However, if the patient has a stromal scarring, especially in the periphery, then you can still take this patient for LASIK. Some of these patients will have basement membrane dystrophy. So basically, whosoever has basement membrane dystrophy is an excellent candidate for surface ablation. You should not take these patients for LASIK because there is increase in chances of epithelial sloughing. They will take very delayed course for epithelial healing per se, and that in turn increases chances of not only infections, DLK, but as well as epithelial ingrowth, most importantly. A few patients may also have guttae. You have to be vigilant because these are the patients who may have interface fluid syndrome, and the flap will not be very stable. So the lids, cornea and the crystalline lens also should be examined for early changes, especially if it is pre-presbyopic or presbyopic age. as we have discussed, basement membrane dystrophy should be identified and these patients should be taken up for surface ablation instead. What I want to actually tell you is some patients will actually have RK or any other incisional surgery done from before. So basically, if a patient has incisional scarring, they are not good candidates for femtosecond LASIK. So actually, nowadays there is a lot of talk about femtosecond lasers over microkeratome, and it does have many advantages. But in some of these situations, they actually are not they're not good candidates for femtosecond because these areas are potential areas of weakness, and the cavitation bubbles who are under tremendous pressure with this can actually escape and cause buttonholes and vertical gas breakthroughs. So you have to make sure that the patients don't have glaucoma. It is actually now taken as a relative contraindication nowadays, and you should probably be very sure about how are you going to manage the post-operative reading because it will be falsely low. Fundus examination, especially the peripheral visualization of the fundus and identification of various degenerations, is of utmost importance, because if the patient has retinal holes, lattice generation, especially with pigmentation and high myopic degenerations, you have to actually make sure, take your retina colleague's opinion about it, and you have to barrage or do laser before you undertake these patients for LASIK procedure. And if you think that the risk is more, then actually it is better to undertake them for surface ablation because you don't induce any suction, and suction is supposed to be one of the most important risk factors for PVD induction per se, which may land up the patient into having retinal tears and detachment later on. Dry eye has to be managed very well before you undertake these patients, and especially in the today's age of computer vision syndromes, many of these patients will have dryness. People who are using contact lens for very, very long time will have dry eyes. So you have to optimize their profile. You can use cyclosporine preoperatively for a couple of months, optimize their diaphragm, and then only undertake them for LASIK procedures, so that their outcome and the visual recovery healing response is optimized. Most important thing is that you have to do corneal pachymetry. Nowadays, I think it will be also dealt with in some of the latest presentations, that with off-scan or pentacam, you can have excellent differential corneal pachymetry, but ultrasound pachymetry is still the gold standard, especially if you want to take the central corneal thickness. And usually there are different kinds of parameters and protocols which are used in different institutes. Many of them, they don't prefer to do refractive correction if the total thickness is less than 500 microns, and you should not leave more than less than 280 or 300 microns of residual wet thickness after the ablation is done and under the LASIK flap. You have to measure the mesopic pupillary size with the help of a pupillometer, which is called as an infrared pupillometer. And basically why it is important, because in most of the Indian patients you don't have a big mesopic pupillary size, but in some patients you will have that. And in those patients you have to make sure the optical zone of laser vision ablation should actually overlap and then go beyond the mesopic pupillary size. Otherwise these patients are going to have a lot of night glare and symptoms, light symptoms because of this. The other thing is that if you want to do a wavefront guided treatment, if the patient has a large pupillary size, usually it is difficult to get very reproducible RMS values of the wavefront analysis. So these are the patients maybe you should avoid doing wavefront guided treatments per se. The thickness of the excised corneal tissue, as we know, is proportional to the ablation zone. So basically you have to now play with increasing the optical zone in terms of the pupillary size and keeping the residual wet thickness beyond 280 or 300 microns. So these are some of the very basic points. Basically, whenever you approach these patients, you have to go in stepwise fashion, be careful of the analysis of the key history and exams. You have to take help of different experienced surgeons, have appropriate patient selection to begin with, choose suitable keratorefractive surgery for every patient. For example, patient with dry eye is probably a better candidate for PRK as compared with LASIK because there is less corneal denervation that is caused. So by this, all these smaller points will also guide you in choosing refractive surgery per se, and ultimately to the happiness of the patient after they get the refractive surgery. So basically this is the proforma which we used to use in the University of Crete in Greece, which is the birthplace of LASIK. Basically you should develop your own proforma which should have the key points in terms of its history, in examination. One important thing that I have not discussed here is that if you want to do presbyopic treatments, you have to know the dominancy of the eye, because it is the non-dominant eye that you will undertake for doing monovision. So you have to make sure that you do it for each and every patient. You should create your own proforma. If anybody wants a copy of this, I can actually email it to you if you email me. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you so much.
Excellent, Varman. That was very refreshing basics even for senior surgeons. And could you please join me on the desk, Dr. Satyamurthy? There is a slight change in the order. I would invite Dr. Satyamurthy to present his topic, and we'll try and restrict the question answers at the end of the session.
Good morning, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Tejas for giving me this opportunity. This is again a basic topic. I will keep it as basic as well. I'm trying my best to explain the things. And this is the one which gives answers for many of the many situations where with the best corrected visual acuity, still patient is not happy. We are all familiar with this concept where the light travels in the linear fashion, in the form of rays from a center on one point of source. And this is how we have understood the optics, including the ocular optics. But geometric optics describes that the light travels in the form of waves. Just like whenever you drop a stone in the pond of water, the ripples that are created, they travel concentrically outwards. And this outward movement of that particular phase is what is called as wavefront. In a system where there are no aberrations at all, this is the ideal optical system. Whatever the input wavefront that is there, the output wavefront matches with that. It is exactly identical. In case if there are any problems with the optical system, there are aberrations with that, the output wavefront will deviate from the input wavefront and then it can be distorted. Similarly, in case of ocular optics, the output wavefront in case of an ideal optical system where there is no aberrations of the eye at all, it will be parallel and regular, whereas in an aberrated eye, it will be irregular. So exactly the deviation from the ideal optical wavefront, this is the ideal optical wavefront, the deviation is what is called as the wavefront error. So this is how to measure this. So there are various instruments which are called as aberrometer. So the one which measures aberration. Basically there are two principles. One which measures the wavefront which comes out of the eye, that is outgoing wavefront aberrometry. The one where the others they measure the light rays as it pass in the wavefront as it passes inside the eye. Since Hartmann-Shack is the one which is commonly used, I'll stick to that, and I am also using the same. The basic principles of this are the light rays, they come from the light source, get deflected, they get reflected into the eye with this dichromatic mirror and forms an image over the retina, and then the reflected rays they come out as the wavefront, and this passes through an array of lenslet and forms an image on the CCD sensor. How exactly that looks like? So this is in case of an ideal optical system where all these points are distinct, they are equidistant from each other, they are regularly arranged. Whereas if you see the other one, if you see these points are irregular, some of them are slanting, some are long, some are big, they are irregularly arranged. So when how to analyze this and then come to a conclusion as to what are the aberrations that we have. So we are using Zernike analysis. The Zernike polynomials are nothing but the mathematical expressions which convert these aberrations into the image multiple images, what we call Zernike polynomials and Zernike modes, and then uses in the form of a pyramid. So here I have shown only the 6 orders from 0 to 5, about 21 of them, but you can increase this to n number of orders. So the first one is 0, which is the ideal optical, which is what we call as piston. Then there are two more orders. The first 1 and 2, they are found as, they are called as low order aberration. Anything more than 3, they are the higher order aberrations. They are the irregular aberrations basically, which can deteriorate the image, which can affect the image that forms on the retina. And then if you see here, these are confusing. There are a lot of mathematical applications here. This Z stands for this aberration. Aberration is also known as Zernike mode. The N is the order. This is each row is one order, so the N stands for that. And the M is the position of this particular thing in this row. So there are lower order aberrations where the tilt is the first order aberration, where the image is very clear, but it is tilted because of the tilting of the retinal surface. Then we have in two the sphere and the cylindrical errors, spherical and cylindrical errors. This is two, and then there are the higher order aberrations. The common ones which are which we usually come across are the oblique trifile, vertical coma, and then spherical aberrations. These are usually which they affect the image quality. Then we have other aberrations like horizontal coma, horizontal trifile, secondary and spherical aberration. All these things, as you. So then the next important thing here is the pupil size. Pupil size is important because in a photopic pupil, the light rays, I mean the image that is formed is very good. As the pupil size increases, the aberrations they increase exponentially, and then that affects the image. So whenever we compare two wavefront analysis, we have to always look at the pupil size. If pupil size is comparable, then the other things are also comparable. Then what are the measures of these aberrations? The quantitative measurement is the RMS value. Then we have the optical measurements like the point square function, modular transfer function, and optical transfer function. What exactly is RMS value? It is nothing but you add the squares of the coefficients and then add them up. Take a square root of this. That is what is the RMS value. This can give the total aberrations or only the higher order aberrations and the lower order aberrations or individual aberrations. And then point spread function is nothing but the image system which can alter the optical point, the object point, as it transfers from object to the image point. So in the ideal optical system, it is a point in the center, whereas it can get distorted depending upon the type of aberrations that are there. Then there is something called a Strain ratio, where this is the ideal optical system. The central, the well-focused thing appears as a peak. So the ratio of the aberrated image is the peak, the PSF peak, and the ideal peak, that is called Strain ratio. If it is close to 1, then that is considered as normal or high quality, good quality correction. Then we have something called modulation transfer function, where the contrast transfer from object to the image is measured. If the ratio between the image contrast and object contrast, if it is good, then the image quality will also be good. This is exactly how the final printout will be. These two images, the one is for the total aberration, the other one is only for the higher order aberration. Then we have the values, the coefficients of individual aberrations, and then there is a simulation of the letter E. Yeah, I'll finish in a minute. Letter E, which can tell that with the higher order aberration how the object looks like, and then with correction how it can. This is to tell the patient how it can be done. And then how to make use of and what are the cutoff points for this. Recently I went through the net and found this. Thomas Salmon has studied more than 2,500 patients, and it's a multicentric study in 9 labs, and then computed the data. And finally, this is the summary of that. He has given, but 6, 5, and 4 the size of the pupils, and the mean, if you double it, usually the normal aberrations, higher aberrations are less than double the mean. So you have for the individual aberrations as well as for the different pupil sizes, but usually the 6 mm pupil size if you take, so these are the values for the individual aberrations. And then, so how exactly we can use aberrometry? We can use it to verify the pre-op refraction, use it as a guide to choose the different laser procedure, and then use the same data for laser for the custom organization of the corrective treatment procedure, and to evaluate the quality of the correction at a later stage. Other applications are it measures the accommodation which is used in the presbyopic curtain, which can be LASIK, and then the pupillometry, which Dr. Vardhaman mentioned, that how to measure the visible pupil and then how best it, and then also to make the glasses and the contact lens alloyables, which are based on the wavefront data. So I'll not go through this. I'll just go through one example. Say 34-year-old male complained of shadows, diplopia, glare, eye strain, and especially when he underwent the retinal cataract by the age of 31 years. And then the visual acuity was 6/6. He had 6/6 vision in both the eyes, and there was no refractive error, but he was still not happy. But the aberrometry showed that there were large higher order aberrations. If you see here the red for the right eye and the blue for the left eye, and then the plaque is again normal. So there are the coma as well as spherical aberrations are more here. And then at a different pupil size, say 5 mm, the aberrations are much more as compared to the 3 mm. And since already patient has undergone radial keratectomy, the current thickness was not adequate for any other further corrective procedures. So probably it's a good idea to reduce the pupil size by giving the patient Bremer or something like that. So in conclusion, I'd like to say abrometry is an important tool in the diagnosis of higher order aberrations as well as the customization of the treatment to assess the quality of the correction, and can be used as an auto-refractor to verify or the refractive errors, the reflection that we do. Then the abrometry can be used to make wavefront guided glasses, contact lenses and IOLs. Thank you for your patient listening.